As long as we manage our own properties, I like to think you do it better than other people. You got to accept when you turn them over to somebody and not try to fight to get your job back. Just sit back and let it go.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com. Hello and welcome to episode 87. If you own rental property, then you have been faced with the choice of either managing that property yourself or hiring third-party professional property management. Today, this episode is dedicated to those who have managed property themselves and then decided to switch over to third-party property management. And I have two returning guests on the show who are here to speak to that. James Loftus was guest on episode number 10. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And Patrick Spitzley, you were on episode 13. Welcome back.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
You're both sophisticated and experienced rental property owners, managers, and investors. And you have both managed your own properties at one time, or you continue to manage some of your properties. But at the same time, you've decided to transition to professional third-party property management. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So James, I'd like to start with you. Just very briefly, kind of bring us up to speed on what kind of properties you invest in and what it was like when you were managing them.
The properties I invest in are all throughout the city. I've rented to my share of low-income folks, working-class people, and some student-type housing. I manage around 130 units, and they're mostly single family and two families. Section 8, I've worked with the nonprofits, I've worked with the homeless shelters, and like I say, I've done student housing. Mm-hmm. I don't specifically go after high-end rentals.
How many of those properties do you still manage?
I manage a little over 40%. I have professional management on just getting close to 60%.
On 60%. And you have how many units? 120?
130.
130. Okay, so so this will be a good opportunity to compare and contrast the difference between your management and bringing on someone else to do it. But before we do that, Patrick, I want to get the update on you. How many units and what type?
Yeah, we're at about 54-ish units. I'm actively acquiring, so that number changes regularly. Just closed on a 17-unit package that is lower income housing that I'm kind of debating what to do with. So ultimately, within my portfolio, I span from some of the lower income to the more luxury high-end market, and we're renting oftentimes to students and professionals. A lot of CPAs, nurses, those types. So we're generally buying a condemned home, putting a massive remodel into it, and then I have intentions of owning it for a long time. And we're generally speaking going to rent to the A-class tenant.
And that has pretty much been your MO from the beginning, but you just recently purchased 17 units that are kind of lower income, and we'll do a different podcast to talk about your strategy there. So James, let's start with you. Now you're the one who contacted me and got me thinking about doing this episode in the first place, because I have definitely talked on the show about how I don't manage my properties. I never wanted to, and I would probably be terrible at it. So I've always used professional third-party property management. And you kind of, the way you put it when you brought up the idea for the show is, well, why don't you get someone on the show who has done both and can compare the two? So I'm wondering if you could just kind of take us back to the time when you were managing all your properties and why you thought that was a good idea.
Well, yeah, I was managing 100% of my properties in 2012. And it had gotten to the point where it just seemed like it was getting a bit much. I had let a lot of bad citizens into my life, and the phone was ringing quite a bit. And the collecting of the rent was getting a little rough. And I was thinking about what I might do as far as alleviating some of the pressure. I thought about possibly getting an office. I thought about hiring somebody to show the places. I thought about, various things I could do. And I didn't like the idea of, well, first of all, I've never had a website. I don't really give out my email address, and I've always kind of liked just being under the radar. I didn't want to have an office. I didn't want to hire somebody. I didn't want to buy a car from to ride around in, and I figured that would all come as a pretty good expense. So slowly, at first, I just gave one house to the management company to see how that would go. And slowly over time, I've added more units to the management company. And if there's a unit that I feel that I'm not managing that well, I usually turn it over to them, see if they do a better job. And the ones that are going along okay, I've continued to manage. But over time, as people move out, I go in, we overhaul the place, and I turn it over to the management company.
So go back to the first house that you decided to turn over to a management company. What was that process like for you?
Well, it wasn't much of a process. It was a two-family that I had purchased, and we had gone through and overhauled it, and it was in pretty good shape. And, turning it over to them, I shouldn't really have had much trouble, and I didn't. It's gone smooth. In fact, they've been managing it ever since then, and it has gone pretty smooth the time that they've had it. But I also wanted to be careful that I don't want to turn over properties that are in terrible shape, because, the management company, they're going to have the same problems you had. So anything that we've turned over to them, we've always made sure that they're in good shape, and it's gone pretty well as far as the maintenance bills and things like that.
So does that mean you if you turn a property over to a management company, you're going to spend some money and some time and some labor into fixing it up and getting it into shape for the company?
Well, whenever anybody moves out of my properties, we always make sure that they're in a condition that we're not going to be going over there the next day. There's not anything leaking. They're really mechanically sound. And if you turn good properties over to the management company, it's going to go well for you. If you turn something over that's, got 5 years worth of work that's deferred, you're not going to have much of a different experience than you were having yourself.
And Patrick, what about you? Let's take us back to when you were managing your properties. How many were you managing, and what kind of problems were you facing?
Yeah, we got up to 13 units before we decided to make a change. And I guess by we, I just say I mean my wife and I. We were living right in the neighborhood in which we owned property. We owned the property in the backyard and the front yard next to the one in the backyard. And what we ran into is, despite having a high level of class of tenant, we would go out for dinner and we would see them there, and then they would mention the 5 things that they'd intended to reach out to me about that were not emergent, but they still wanted satisfied. So the challenge was, my wife and I would go out for a nice dinner on a Friday night, and they would expect me to be there Saturday morning because I was their neighbor. So what that led to was this inner turmoil, this inner tension of, if I intend to grow a portfolio, this is going to happen more. This is going to happen more often. And then the other challenge is, you see somebody out in public that owes you money, and is it appropriate for me as their landlord to pursue them in the middle of the street to discuss the fact that they owe me money? So I think I saw that freight train coming a little bit, knowing what my longer term goals were. And my longer term goals were and still are growth. So I hit a crossroads where my mind, my energy, my time was getting focused on the management piece of what we do, and it made growth more challenging. It impeded what our longer term goals were, and it changed the lifestyle for us. So we then transitioned to a third party management for all of our properties, and to this day I don't manage any of my units.
Take us back to the first property. Did you do it one at a time like James did, or did you just say, here's the entire portfolio, take it over?
I had a pre-existing relationship with a management company that was doing the marketing piece of of finding tenants. So I'd already had a working relationship with a management company because they would land the tenant for me, and then I would get an email with their contact information, and then I would slide in with leases and deposits and collections and all of that. So I'd already had some of that taste in my mouth as to what that can look like. So it was an easy transition. And to answer your question, I did them all at once. I just knew that was what was right for me. I didn't want to have people have my personal cell phone anymore, meaning tenants. And it still took a couple of years to work that out of the system. I still get an email every once in a while as a rental reference for a tenant from many years ago. So I just turned them all over in one fell swoop. And then as we continued to grow, I just turned them over the second that we pass our final inspection.
Great. And was there any sort of emotional toll that you went through in handing your babies over to someone else to take care of?
Yes and no. One of the things that I noticed is when we completed that construction, and we're talking very large remodels, $50,000 to $150,000. So these properties are in great shape when they're done. The emotional toll wasn't in giving them to a management company. It was more so the fact that people were going to move into my property and not live in it in the way that I thought that they should. So while I was managing my own properties, that was actually the harder part for me, is seeing the garbage overflowing, the brand new wood floors getting scratched, the furniture or lack thereof oftentimes in these units. So I think that was really the emotional piece for me, was seeing that they weren't caring for my property in the way that I thought they would and should.
James, for you, was there any sort of emotional toll in handing your babies over to someone else? No,
there wasn't really any emotional toll. Not at all. I mean, I had done it long enough, and I find with property management that if you're going to turn your properties over to somebody, and I've thought about this a long time, because as long as we manage our own properties, you like to think you do it better than other people and whatever. But you got to accept when you turn them over to somebody and not try to fight to get your job back. Just sit back and let it go.
So it seems to me that would be a pretty strong impulse to have to fight.
It has been.
Yeah. So do you have any instances or examples of going through that process, watching the management company do it in a way that you were not approving of, but yet having to bite your tongue and just let them do it their way?
Well, one common complaint that you get from people that have property management is that the management company doesn't drive by often enough. And myself, because I'm in the city all day, every day, I'm driving by the properties. So I see a lot of things, and I think there's a lot of value in going by your properties. But the management company is not going to do that. But I will also say that the management company, through their screening, places a much better tenant in there that doesn't require, driving by the house all the time, seeing what's going on, because they're not there 24/7 tearing up the place, and they're probably at work. But the screening process takes care of a lot of the issues that I used to need to clean up.
So when you drive by your properties every day, do you ever get out of the car and go pick something up off the lawn or fix a window or anything like that?
Always.
So you still can't. So you're still in it. You still can't help yourself.
Well, yeah, it's been tough, but I'm getting better with it all the time, and I give the management company more properties all the time, and it's taken a while, but we're getting to know each other, the management company and myself. They've changed some things to comply with me, and some of the things that I thought that were really important are starting to be less important to me.
Patrick, what were things that were important to you when you were managing that may not have been as important to the management company that you turned your properties over to, but in the end you realized maybe they weren't as important?
Sure. To be honest, there's nothing that really jumps out in my mind. I think I was viewing it as a business, and they kind of aren't my babies. Yes, I put my heart and soul into getting these things into production, but I have a very business-oriented mindset in that it is a cash-producing asset. And to that end, it's to be viewed as a business. So I don't know that I was super particular on how they go about it. And to that end, they are professionals in this. Not that I wasn't a professional, but this is what they eat, sleep, and breathe with no emotional attachment. Therefore, they can make great, educated, emotionless, not in a bad way, but they don't include emotion in their decisions, much like an owner does. So I think that I just had the outlook that they are probably better at it than me. And ultimately, they can make those decisions on my behalf. So I haven't had any glaring concerns, maybe with some small maintenance issues. And why was I billed $50 for that toilet paper holder that came off? So I guess some of those pieces. But if I owned a management company, I would expect to bill $50 for the toilet paper holder that came off, because I have to have the systems in place and the processes and the maintenance staff, and they've got to go deal with it, and they've got to coordinate with the tenant, and they've got to, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So right there, isn't that why a lot of people feel that they should manage their own properties? Because they look at that bill, $50 for a toilet paper holder, which is a realistic expense when you have a management company. I mean, maybe they'll charge you less, maybe they'll charge you more. Some of them will. But people look at that and they say, well, I could do it myself for a lot less than $50. What do you say to that person, James? I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. I'd also like to tell you about Joshua Schaub and his team at Icon Realty Group, a full-service real estate company in the West Michigan area. Joshua has been a guest on this show several times, and he and his team at Icon Realty Group help buyers gain an edge in this competitive market. They assist sellers in getting the best price and terms for their properties, and they work with investors to understand the numbers, neighborhoods, and market forces that will set them up for long-term success. To learn more and get a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Joshua at 616-216-2000 or visit theiconrealtygroup.com.
Well, myself, right from the beginning, I told myself I wasn't going to micromanage the maintenance bills. I mean, if the end goal for me would be that I don't manage anything. And if I'm not going to manage anything, well, I got to accept that it may not be done the way I was going to do it. And obviously it's going to cost more. And if you can't get over that, I don't think you ought to use professional property management.
So that to me, that really seems like the crux of the psychological hurdle, is that $50 toilet paper holder. Because I could do it, I'm terrible with that kind of thing, but I could still do it myself for a lot less than $50. But it's going to take me a trip to Home Depot, Home Depot, and it's going to take me the time to do it. And when I really think about it, well, my time and effort is worth more than $50.
And that's tripping over dollars to save pennies in the long run too. In that, if I can bring another asset to market and get top dollar rent, I would much rather focus my energy and time on that versus repairing toilet paper holders.
Yeah, is that one of the biggest things that you have to kind of just bite your tongue on is maintenance expenses, or are there what other issues are there that you might have to really kind of just shut up about?
I don't think for myself the maintenance expenses have been a big deal. You hear a lot of people that like to talk about the $50 toilet holder, but I mean, when I get my monthly statement, the portion of it that are maintenance costs are generally pretty low. It's not enough worth to go nuts about. The things that probably concern me more is I used to be much more fluid. If somebody wasn't paying the rent or doing something that was particularly aggravating to me, I don't have an attorney. I go down to court and file. where their wheels turn much slower. They may deal with an attorney that likes to, sometime in the middle of the month, file all their landlord-tenant stuff. And it's a little frustrating sitting back and watching the wheels turn slower than when you did it. But in all reality, one should expect that to happen.
Yeah, so timeliness it might be an issue then.
Timeliness, and a lot of landlords, because their phone is tied to their hip, they have a vacant unit, somebody calls them up, they want to see it, they may well go over there right now, and they may rent it right now. But the wheels are not going to turn that fast with the management company. They have showing times.
To James's point, I was actually quite the opposite in that I would get the story, or, the paycheck doesn't come till Friday. I don't have the rent now. And I'd say, okay, great, no problem. So then I'd allow it that month. And then that 3 days would turn into 7 days the following month. And then 7 days, et cetera, et cetera. So I was quite the opposite in that as an owner, I was too slow to react. I listened to the stories and I believed them, and I would get taken advantage of. And then I wouldn't file until the 21st day or something to that end. So I was actually much more slow moving than the management companies. Whereas my management companies that I use now, they're sending out their notices on the 2nd. The moment that the rent is late, they are starting that process. The process has set 7-day notice, and there's processes that need to take place that if you delay on, you can't move on to the next step. So I'm actually quite the opposite in that it expedited the speed. And to that end, we pre-lease our units 6 to 8 months in advance. As an owner, I had a hard time doing that and managing that marketing and staying up on that. So my default would have been, okay, I've got a vacant unit. Yes, I need to rush to fill it. Therefore, I'm getting a tenant, not necessarily that procrastinated, but it isn't necessarily my highest common denominator tenant that I could have landed if I was pre-leasing months in advance. So quite the opposite of what James said was what was happening in my life, in that by going to a management company, the timing got quicker and better and benefited my company.
And did you notice that your income was improving because of that?
Management companies generally have better marketing arms than Patrick Spitzley on Craigslist. So the short answer to your question is yes. They can rent these properties for more than I can. And it's largely because these management companies build up a reputation, at least the one that I primarily use, in that they are the go-to for the nicest rentals in town. So they've got a pool of tenants that are constantly on the lookout and sending their friends to that company and all of that. As an individual owner with 54 units, I can't capitalize on that goodwill and that reputation. I can try, but I don't think I can maximize the dollars that the management company can rent it for. And to that end, when we're pre-leasing 6 to 8 months in advance, we can set our rent numbers very high, and in the event that we don't get any action, we can drop it. And then another month goes by, we can drop it. As an individual owner, having those systems in place and those processes are, for me, proved to be challenging that far in advance.
Mm-hmm. What did you notice that as well, James, with the systems, that the third-party management was filling your units faster, getting better tenants, and getting tenants who paid a lot quicker?
Well, they're definitely getting better tenants, and they're getting higher rents. The tenants don't seem to stay as long, which is a negative. And because of the way rents have gone up in our city over the last few years, it's kind of hard to gauge. I would say they're collecting more rent, but rents have really gone up.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it's kind of hard to put my finger on that. And like I say, I think that the units stay vacant longer than I'm comfortable with, but whether it's actually affecting me, because the revenue is quite good. So I don't want to, there's a method to their madness, but I think they probably in the end do get more rent. And they also, upon move out, I find that the places are being returned in much better shape.
And that saves you a lot of money right there.
That's definite.
Yeah. What would you say to those who believe that hiring third-party management is just going to be too costly. It's going to cost them too much. The typical charge is 10% of your rent income, plus maintenance and leasing fees. So the fees really all add up. I mean, if you really add up everything that you're paying, surcharges on improvements or whatever, you're really paying a management company 18 to 25% of your income, because if you're paying first month's rent on a new lease that's signed, it really starts to add up. What do you say to people who make that argument like I just did?
Well, I guess you got to ask yourself, what is the shelf life of a landlord? I mean, I think most people don't want to be a landlord for 30, 40 years. And, if you live in the city, like Patrick was saying, people approach you, whatever, you're out, have that in your life. I mean, do you want to live that life? But for me, the management company is a necessity. And, I want my life back. And, I'm taking it back a piece at a time. I mean, I like being busy. It's not no living hell or anything for me working, dealing with tenants and stuff. I do not enjoy screening tenants. The units that I have that I manage, I also pay them to lease. I haven't rented out a place in years now because I just got tired of picking winners and losers. But I think you just got to ask yourself, if you want to have your life back, there's going to be some things maybe you don't agree with, but I don't think at all for what I pay on a monthly basis, it's well worth it.
I think there's some truth to the argument in that it does cost more. But if they can rent it for more, it oftentimes offsets that expense. And then the other side of that is I would be at 13 units still. So I would have such a distaste for real estate in my mouth that I would be a disgruntled landlord who sticks at 13 units. So as a result of turning it over, it freed up my time, my mind for growth.
Yeah,
so
there's an opportunity cost.
Certainly.
Yeah,
so by adding other assets and adding simply more rent every month, my potential is, I should say the potential now versus managing my own is so much greater. There's no limit to the amount of property that I can acquire now based on my time to manage my own properties. I could get up to 1,000 units in our current system. Whereas if I was managing them myself and I didn't turn over any of that responsibility to anybody else in the form of owning my own management company or employing a management company, there's a limit, there's a cap to what I can achieve as a business owner.
So did either of you consider hiring someone rather than turning it over to a third-party management company, bringing on your own team to take a lot of those responsibilities off your shoulder? Did you do that, Patrick?
Yeah, certainly. I'm a licensed real estate broker, and I own a real estate brokerage. So I actually have the ability, with very little effort, to start my own company. And I have people that I work with every day that I could turn a lot of those responsibilities over to. The challenge for me is that I don't necessarily view a property management company as a profitable business. So yes, I could use it to manage my own properties, but at the end of the day, is that cost savings to be viewed as profit? Is that cost savings going to be limiting other opportunities? And I think simply owning a management company just at the end of the day is not going to throw me capital like owning additional assets. So if I can focus my energy on what I'm good at, and owning a management company simply is not what I'm good at.
What about you, James?
Well, I've had people ask me over the years to manage their properties, and it's just something I don't want anything to do with. I don't want any customers. I don't want anybody like me. But no, I would not start a management company. I'm pretty happy with how it's going.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a passion. Owning a management company is not something I'm passionate about. Buying real estate and doing to the properties what we do is what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Well, talk about the opportunity costs and how managing your own, in your case, Patrick, managing your own properties kind of limited your ability to grow. But James, you built a 130 unit portfolio while you were managing. How is it you were able to do both, manage and build a strong portfolio?
Just worked at it a lot. Just, always had a lot of energy, and just, I really didn't mind doing it. But it just got to the point where it was too much. I mean, I was at a point where I just didn't think I could do anymore, and
So you reached a limit. So you were able to do it, but at some point you kind of hit a wall.
yeah, and I mean, there's no way I wanted to sustain that activity. As Patrick was saying, if he runs into somebody in public, that owes him rent, how does he handle that? Well, back then, if I was at an intersection and somebody owed me money, I'd probably get out of my car and go over and get it, because that was on my list of things to do. But and I really enjoy with the management company that I don't have these interactions with tenants where they moved out, they got half of their deposit, they're going nuts over it, and they're going to call 30 times over $50 that they were charged, or and like I say, the screening, I don't care for that at all. And the maintenance end of it, and partially because they are running to better tenants, but I don't get near the phone calls I once did. And as Patrick was saying, that he still gets phone calls on his phone, even though he doesn't. I don't know if I'll ever quit getting phone calls on my phone. I mean, all the shelters that have my number and all the things, even though I have not personally rented a place for years, I do think about getting a phone now and then. A different phone number. I've thought about it a lot. I haven't done it, but I don't know if the calls are ever going to quit coming.
So you get the calls, but you don't enjoy getting the calls.
No, and I also have a recording on my phone that I have nothing available, and that seems to get rid of a lot of messages. That really, I don't get many messages.
What are some of the things that your management company does much better than you were ever able to do?
All of it.
There's nothing that you're like, oh, I could have done better.
My strong suit is simply not managing property. My strong suit is producing a cash flowing asset that I hope has very low maintenance and challenges for many years. So I think my honest answer is they are simply better at all of it. They are better at getting great tenants. They are better at collecting rent and not being pushovers. They are better at keeping security deposits. That's another piece that was always, much like James just mentioned, that $50 phone call that you get, I was too soft. Or generally, I generally have a loving, caring heart, and I care about people. So by default, I would always err on the side of the tenant and not myself. And I feared having a bad reputation as being that landlord and all of that. So I genuinely think that all of it, maybe I could step in at turnovers and have my company handle that. But to that end, there's so many moving parts in this, and with the amount of properties that we have, I don't even know that I could manage that any better because of the size that we're at now. I mean, they ramp up and hire contractors and hire all sorts of different pieces for their turnover season. And I would argue I probably can't even do as good of a job with that anymore. Maybe right when we first started, but we're at a size now where we'd have to shift everything, all of my company's focus to only turnovers.
And James, what about you? What does your management company do better than you were ever able to do?
Well, definitely the screening. I mean, I was always, because I was doing everything, somebody came by, they looked like they were a player. I wasn't going to look at 30 people. And as a result, I let a lot of people in my life that turned out to be a lot of work. They'll show the place 20 times if that's what it takes. And I just simply don't have the patience for that anymore. Yeah, and they have a pretty well-oiled machine for collections. I mean, that's what they do. They're going to be after the people for the money, and a private landlord will be more willing to bend and make a note to check with the person in a week or two or whatever, where the management company, they tend to be more regimented in it, where if this doesn't happen by this.
Going back to just the financials, when you sit down and look at your financial statements at the end of the month, and you compare them to where you were when you were managing your own properties, what's your takeaway?
I think that it's very hard to assign a value to my time. So am I worth $10 an hour, $100 an hour, 1,000, 10,000? And there's no real direct answer to that. But if I'm out getting deals and creating long-term wealth, or, I did a flip recently that we had some success on that I didn't have much time into. So I don't know what my hourly rate is, but the amount that I am saving in the form of managing my own property is certainly nowhere near how much I can make, as a real estate agent, as a builder, as a flipper investor. So those two numbers just are nowhere near each other for me.
Myself, I don't, I'm at a point in life where my time is worth more than anything to me right now. And just being able to, be able to take time off whenever I want is worth a lot to me. And I don't really feel that the management expense is that big a deal. I mean, it's a value to me to have my time. And, ultimately I see myself, I'm going to continue giving properties a management company, and I wouldn't be giving them to them if I didn't have a good feeling about it. I don't love everything about it, but I never will. It's just in my nature. I was in the trenches with it too long. As far as, is it worth it? What is your property worth if you have terrible tenants in it when you go to sell it as a property? They have good tenants. It's worth a lot more, by having it managed well. And, if you own a lot of properties, there's definitely going to be some that you're not managing that well. There's going to be some you don't want to drive by. But for me, having better tenants in the house, it really means a lot because, you think about selling your properties. My mother had 3 two-families. She owned a long time. And when she went to sell those properties, she really got hammered on the price because she had terrible tenants in them. And I always tried to tell her to use property management, but she was stubborn. But I believe she paid a really good price for not doing so.
Property management company is, if they're good, and a lot of them here in Grand Rapids are very, very good, they will keep up the value of your property and improve the value of your property. Absolutely. Your trip, you were able to take some time off and go away for a period of time. Tell us briefly about that.
Yeah, my wife and I greatly value travel and experiences, and we're still young and healthy, and so we value getting away and getting out into the world. And so we just took an extended trip to Europe, and I got 4, we've got, well over 50 units, and I got about 4 emails over that time. And so I honestly had maybe 15 minutes invested during my entire time away into managing my rentals, and the money still showed up in the bank account. It's an automatic deposit. So it was incredible to be out doing those things that really matter to my wife and I, and things that we're intentional about doing, but still be able to collect on rent and not have the burden of management, or not have the burden of leaving a voicemail on my phone, directing them to somebody that I work with that can take care of them. And now that guy's having time away from his family on a Saturday because he got that phone call. So just not having that burden on my shoulders has freed me up to maximize my time as to what I really care to do. And in a recent case, it was to travel.
That's fantastic. Yeah, when you hire a management company, you're building your team.
Right.
And that team is a system, and if they're a good team, they allow you to go off and do your own thing and not have to worry about your properties and be tied to them. And they take care of your properties so that in the end, when you do sell them, they're in better shape, and you get the value that you should get out of them. Well, James, what are some of the other considerations that we haven't talked about yet that people need to take into account if they're thinking of switching to third-party management?
Well, one big consideration for me would be you have to pick a management company that you have trust in. You have to really be able to trust them. Myself, I've heard of people that have hired other management companies, and the management company went out of business or whatever, and they lost all their security deposits. The management company holds all the security deposits. They go out of business. You owe them deposits to the tenants. So, trust is a big deal. For myself, they're holding $50,000, $60,000 in deposit money that if I just went and hired somebody that didn't have good footing and they went out of business, that would be a big problem.
So trust is important. What about just the transition cost of switching to third-party management?
One cost that was unexpected, but it should have been expected, is that the management company, you will not get your check till later in the month, usually around the end of the month, and it's common for some management companies to go out 45 days. So you're pretty much going to lose a month to a month and a half's cash flow, and that has to be considered in the equation.
You lose it, or you're delayed in receiving it?
You get it back when you retire.
Yeah, because the management company will typically hold the money, the rent income, in a separate account, so that they make sure all their bills are paid and your bills are paid before they then release whatever's left over to you, in a 30 to 45 day period after they've received it. That's pretty much what
yeah, and they're also, you forget after you've had your properties managed that you'll always have slow payers. And they want to give you a true monthly statement, and they want to leave the window open as long as possible. And it's just the way it works out. But when you're doing it yourself, it's a small percentage that pays late. You're used to getting the lion's share of the money when it's supposed to come. So it is an adjustment.
Yeah. Did you find similar adjustments? Any transition costs when you switched to professional management, Patrick?
Yeah, we experienced some of the same things that he mentioned, in that I was so used to getting it on the first, and then the check from the deposit, I should say, from the management company didn't come until the 15th, for example. Now that's only 15 days. That's easier to stomach. The other side of it is security deposits, in that I was holding a bunch of security deposit money, and I had to transfer that to the management company. So though that security deposit money isn't yours, and you're holding it generally in a separate account and doing it all legally, it still hurts to turn that over, in that that obviously that's not your money to begin with, but for me it gives me a sense of security, hence the name security deposit. So to give that money over stung a little bit.
What are some of the other costs that we should be talking about that people may not or should be aware of?
There's a cost to release your unit after a tenant's been at your place for a year, and they approach the tenant and have them sign a new lease. They'll charge you a fee for doing that.
Yeah, which can typically be half a month's rent or half.
Yeah,
or full
it ranges. Rent. Well, I have limited experience. I use one management company.
What do they charge?
I think it's like $200.
$200. So a leasing fee of $200.
Yeah.
What about you, Pat? What do you pay for the leasing fee?
In my case, for the properties, when I was managing them myself, it was a full month's rent to land the tenant. So that covered the marketing. They did the screening, made a recommendation, and then I stepped in. So that was a full month's rent. Again, they were maximizing the rent rate. They were getting hundreds of dollars more a month relative to what I was able to achieve. Now that they manage them, now that I no longer manage them, it's a half month's rent.
Half month.
Above and beyond the management fee.
As we wrap it up here, what other advice do you have for people who are listening? They manage their own properties. They've listened to kind of the pros and cons that we've just laid out, but they're still thinking, you know what, I can do it better. What would you say to them?
I would ask them what kind of life they want to live. So if they want to be anchored to their cell phone, and includes nights, weekends, mornings, at all times, and they feel as though they can save on maintenance and they can maximize in areas that management companies cannot maximize, and if they choose that lifestyle and that works for them, great. For me, that was not the direction that made sense for me. I don't feeling like my cell phone is a tether. In our growth phase, generally the work is done during the day. It's generally not done on the weekends. It frees me up so that I can have a personal life outside of being a landlord. So there's the lifestyle piece that I regained when we turned it over to a management company. And that was of a lot of value to me. I cannot assign a dollar amount to not having a text from a tenant at midnight or on the weekends. A lot of my tenants would reach out to me in the evenings because they were working class people who are great employees, so they don't deal with the personal stuff during the work day. Well, I wish they would have, because I was working during the workday, but then I would get a phone call, an email, a text message, whatever was allowed. And it was generally Friday evenings, almost exclusively were my maintenance requests Friday evenings. And as the person who expects them to pay rent on time, I had a standard that I had to hurry up and fix things on time and or quickly. And oftentimes that meant on a Saturday or a Sunday or an evening, because I felt as though my expectations of them in the form of paying rent on time should be reflected in my actions of how I serve them as a customer. So there was an inner tension that was created there that I got back when I turned over to a management company.
James, what about you? What would you say to someone who's listened to all the pros and cons, but is still on the fence? They still think they can do a better job managing their own properties.
One other thing that ought to be thought about is you're not going to live forever. In my situation, because I have an ongoing relationship with a management company, I get hit by a bus tomorrow. I don't want my wife managing these properties. You see it time and time again. A landlord that has a handful of properties or whatever, they pass away and their wife says, I don't want nothing to do with this. And then they have a fire sale. Whereas in my case, if I get hit by a bus, my wife could just simply say, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. Call a management company, hand over the whatever needs to be handed over, the files. And I think that's peace of mind, because you don't want to leave your wife a mess. But I just don't think there's that much great joy in being a full-time landlord until you're 90. There is myself, I've always been a nuts and bolts guy, and I don't mind having something to do. I'm always working on something. I enjoy it. I don't enjoy the tenant landlord stuff, but I don't have a big problem with making things go. But I don't ever see myself having no responsibilities in this business. It doesn't mind me. I don't mind having some. I may get down to there's 3 properties I want to mother hen. But, I have that option to do it. But I do see myself turning more over all the time. But I just don't think that it's healthy to do the same thing forever, unless you really want to do it. I mean, some old guys want to be landlords forever. And if you do, don't get management.
Yeah. We're not trying to convince anyone that they should. We're just kind of laying out the pros and cons. And if someone loves doing it and is good at it, and they're making the money that they feel they should be making, then more power to them.
Yeah, and I mean, some people are better at dealing with people than other people. Some people, they get arguing with their tenants all the time. If that's your situation, you might want to hand it over.
I think we've all witnessed the dysfunctional tenant-landlord relationship. And if you find that you're a landlord who's in a dysfunctional relationship with your tenant, you need to look at yourself and say, why am I putting myself through this? Why is that necessary?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you got to enjoy what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a different podcast to talk about the psychological need to interact with your tenants in a certain way. Well, Patrick and James, I want to thank you for taking the time to come and kind of share the pros and cons of handing over your properties to a property management company. And you've both done it. And to some it might seem a scary thing, but in both your cases, it seemed like a very logical next step for both of you. So thanks for taking the time to talk about it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us. That wasn't so bad.
Good enough? That wasn't so bad. Cool.
Yeah, you see these guys, I run into them, that go in and out of property management, and you just got to figure out, either you're in it or you're not. I mean, if you don't want to pull yourself out of it, I mean, you quit your job, you have nothing to do. It's not that bad having a few tenants, if that's what you want to do. My dad, he had 3 2-families and he retired. My mom always wanted to sell them, and my dad, no way. Because my dad could tell my mom he's going over to this house to do something and go down to the last chance and sit at the bar and get out of the house. Those houses go, he's got no excuse.
Yeah.
I think a lot about, at any point I can stop and self-manage again if I care to. Mm-hmm. I'm only 32. What am I, 32?
Yeah, but you say that, and I think all the time that I can do it better. And then, like I say to my wife used to do all my books. She didn't go around collect rent or anything. I mean, I collected all the rent stuff, but my wife, bring the money to her, does all the banking. I don't write any checks. But I say to my wife, I go, well, she'll be talking about my management company or something. I say, well, do you want to start doing it again? No.
Yeah, right. And I wouldn't argue that I could do it any better. I'm just thinking if I stopped, I think a lot about like, what do I do when I'm not in growth mode? And that could be any day. I could just flip a switch and go, this, like you with you've kind of said you're on the sidelines with multifamily. I could do that with what I do too. And and then if I just wanted a job, I could transition to managing my own properties. But to all what we just talked about, I still can't do it better. I'm not passionate about it. But if I want to just simply fill time, it is an option.
I'm thinking if I went back, I would notice right away all the things I didn't like about it that I forgot that I handed off to somebody.
The burdens you no longer bear.
Yeah.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And Icon Realty Group, helping home buyers, sellers, and investors in the West Michigan area. Find out more at theiconrealtygroup.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.